Welcome to the Greater Irvine Chamber Business Insights podcast series, where we address challenges and ideas for early stage and entrepreneurial business leaders. Your host today is Dave Coffaro, Interim President and CEO of the Greater Irvine Chamber.
Well, hello, folks. I'm Dave Coffaro with the Greater Irvine Chamber Business Insight podcast. We're glad to have you with us today. And developing a meaningful and actionable business plan, it's really critical for business owners and business leaders' success in the new year. And so, with this in mind, today's episode is focused on how to make your 2025 business plan matter. And what I mean by that is a lot of companies do a plan and then it just sort of sits and collects dust and it's a document, but it's not really meaningful. This conversation is about how you make it meaningful, actionable, something that you live throughout the year. So our guest today, Amin Khalifa, is chairman of SCORE Orange County, and he is an absolute subject matter expert on the subject of business planning. So Amin, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
Or I should say welcome back because this is a return engagement. So welcome back. Thank you for being with us.
Sure thing.
So to start us off, would you share your thoughts on why annual planning is so critical for any type or size of business?
Sure, Dave. I think, planning is very important. We spend our lives busy with all kinds of issues in business and, sales today and manufacturing problems tomorrow. We don't often sit back to see what's going on in the business today. And planning for the future has to start with reflecting on what happens today.
Yeah. So I think a good way to look at that is today's actions become tomorrow's results. So how do you sort of reverse engineer that and say, what are the results you want to create? And then how does that inform the actions?
So I just always believe in, if you have time to do a strategic plan, fine. But at the very least, look at some of the trends. For example, look at your sales this current year versus the prior year. Have any customers or any sectors emerged? Are some others fading away? And, try to understand from that, is there something actually happening in the marketplace that is now going to make you look at one customer or customer segment and concentrate on that more and make that sort of an initiative for the future, put marketing or social media dollars against it, all those sorts of things. So I think it first is look back at the last year, see what's changing and plan for that.
So let's take that context a little broader. I mean, where do you recommend business owners and leaders start their planning process? What's the best starting line for folks to think about?
Well, I really, I've done a lot of different processes. My favorite one is to start with a strategic plan where you sort of really look at all the aspects of the business, all the aspects of what's going on in the world, and start to think about where are we positioned and where is the future taking us, and reposition towards that future. Whether there are new markets opening up, whether it's an international market or a new sector. And, the people that take the fastest advantage of that really get a great head start, and it really drives business in the future.
Mm-hmm. Now, you're talking about taking this strategic view, and I know that there are some people who look at the annual plan as just purely a financial exercise, really a budget. Others see it as much more than that. What's your view and why?
Well, to me, a budget exercise is often, let's take last year's budget and add 5% to it or some percentage to it. And that's just a numbers exercise. That doesn't get you the real meaning of what and real context of what's going on in the business. So if you can reflect on a strategic plan and then say, okay, now I kind of understand where the landscape is going. What's the first year of that strategic plan? What do I do this year that will help position the company for future growth?
So really digging deeper and asking those deep questions. And this kind of leads back to something that you touched on about customers and trends. Every business at some level revolves around a customer, some type, whether it's B2B, B2C, B2B2C, whatever. How can businesses effectively identify and kind of adapt to changes in their customer base and their evolving expectations? Because we know that expectations don't stay stagnant, they're dynamic.
Right. So scanning the landscape, we always talk about SWOT analysis with strengths and weaknesses and opportunities and trends in the business world. So once we pick up on some keys of what is changing, that can really help us innovate. Sometimes it's a new manufacturing process, that you have to create or adopt. And to fulfill the sales ultimately. I know of a lot of companies where the smallest part of their business suddenly becomes the biggest part of their business. Um, I'll give you just an example. Costco came into being, I don't know, about 30 years ago, and I was working at Pepsi Cola at the time. And the sales and marketing people at Pepsi just didn't like Costco. They were you had to have a low price with them and et cetera, and just it was against their grain. They liked big, the big shops, the big, uh, grocery stores and, the convenience stores, and that was sort of the target. Well, we did a financial analysis of Costco, and Costco actually is a very low expense company from your perspective. They don't expect to go to Super Bowls. They don't expect to get sort of coupons in the mail and all kinds of other promotional activities. And ultimately, they come with a tractor trailer and you fill that up uh, to the point that the plant managers already were smart enough to know that, oh, Costco's coming tomorrow. Let me run a lot of Pepsi and Diet Pepsi because that's what they take, and they don't take anything else. And and so when you looked at all the cost of it, Costco ended up being a very good, profitable customer. And once we recognized that, we pivoted to that, made special packaging for them. 12 packs started at Costco, and and there we went and had now a new opportunity that was right under our noses, but weren't paying any attention to.
That's really interesting. And as you say that, it almost sounds like if that opportunity would have been missed, it could turn into a threat because somebody else, Coca-Cola, would have seized the moment or some other soda company and then all of a sudden started eating away at your share at PepsiCo.
Yes, it would have been an opportunity lost, certainly. Yeah, that was a vital one to recognize and take advantage of.
I also like the idea of doing those SWOT analyses and continually asking the questions, what are our strengths? Have they changed? What are our weaknesses? Have they changed? Opportunities, threats, how do they look going ahead? And this is the perfect time of year to be doing that, just taking that forward view. So that leads to the question, as you look ahead into the new year, what external factors, so things like the economy, social factors, tech, maybe regulatory changes, what things do you see as shaping customer behaviors in the new year? And how do you think businesses should respond through their planning work?
Yes, every new year brings a new set of uncertainties. We leave 2024 with a booming economy. Unemployment is low. Um, you know, even the holiday season seems to be shaping up to be a healthy season, a positive season. So, um, going into next year, things look okay. And new administrations coming into play, and that is where some of the questions come in. Um, so, tariffs, for example, tariffs is a tax on business, and how would that affect many of the businesses? Can you change sourcing so that your sourcing is more US based and not so much China based? Some of those things you have to work on, it might take 2 or 3 years to get there. But certainly tariffs would be one of the things I'm thinking about in the new year. The second thing is interest rates. As interest rates are dropping, the federal deficit continues to increase. And so actually, long-term interest rates might not come down very much. So when you're looking at, um, you know, better short-term rates, but the long-term rates are maybe not coming down at all. So that's your cost of borrowing. If it's going to be more long-term, well, uh, that might not be a big change from the current year. So you have to think about those things. Obviously, AI is now a big factor in almost everything. And how will that impact your business? So there are always new external factors, and it's probably a little more uncertain going into next year because of this tariff situation than other years.
With that uncertainty and with what we do know, right? So the known, the unknown, we one thing that's for certain is that there will be continuous evolution. Things are going to continue to change. So what steps should businesses take to think about their products, their services, the way they're delivering to their customers so that they're going to meet their expectations, the customers' expectations in the new year? Are there things that the business people could be doing now to sort of answer the question, how are we going to align with that evolving customer in the new year?
Well, I think about a great businessman who used to be a great quarterback, Roger Staubach, um, and he's developed a whole new business. And he said, well, it was the easiest thing ever. He just went out and talked to a lot of customers. And he realized that in the commercial real estate space, nobody was representing the buyer or the renter, and so all the customers were representing the seller. And he now has, I believe it's a multi-billion dollar business in commercial real estate because he listened to the customers. So I would say that in-depth discussions with your closest customers and even some new customers is one of the ways that you learn what you need to do for the future. It sounds so simple, but to this day, when I advise clients, it's talk to your customers.
I think that's great counsel. I also know as a business owner, it's easy to hear things that may not feel comfortable. So, how do you advise your clients, the businesses you work with, on how to avoid being defensive? You ask the customer, they tell you, and you start saying, yeah, but, yeah, but, yeah, but how do you get past that? I mean,
Well, that's the skill of listening. And you just have to, uh, uh, you know, not only do you have to listen, you have to probe. When somebody says, "Boy, that you don't do this very well," try to get to really what is underneath that, and understand it, and then do something about it. And um, y- y- you know, uh, when you go and ask for feedback, you've got to be prepared for what comes back, and you've got to be able to act on it, especially when you find it becomes a trend. A one-off is a one-off, but if you're getting it from several customers, then that's the fact, not what's in your head.
sure, sure. Yeah, that practicing that art of listening is so important. I have to remind myself that all the time and not assume that I understand my customers because something that may have been important to them yesterday is less so today. And there is something new that's become super important to them today that I need to be attuned to. Now, there's another important part of planning, and that's thinking through the risks that might be on the horizon. How can businesses identify the most significant controllable risks? So things like maybe declining sales, customer attrition, not listening to where the changes are coming from, and what proactive measures can they take to sort of mitigate these risks?
Well, I'm glad you talked about controllable risks because once in a while we have something like the pandemic, which uh, I I don't know that anybody could have prepared for that. Something that hadn't happened in at least pretty much 100 years. Yeah, controllable risk. Well, first of all, you have to understand from a macro level. from a top-down level, what's happening environmentally. For example, this thing with AI, it is going to impact business. And so understanding that this is a factor and then trying to figure out how this impacts you that's one thing that you have to think about, maybe get some advice about. Um, but for all the other uh, all the other areas that you are that might be right in front of you, talking to customers, talking to competitors, talking to other folks that are outside of the field, getting advice from many different constituencies, I think is one of the ways that it can help. I did have a funny story once when um, a salesman was with me, and we were talking um, to a customer, and the customer is saying, what can we do better? And he said, well, you could deliver more on time, you could deliver the right products. Um, you could be, definitely be more timely because it really impacts our entire day. And so we thanked the customer. He walked away, and the salesman turned to me and says, "You see, they need a lower price." so, so if you're programmed going in to listen for something, you're going to hear it whether the customer ever tells it to you or not. So,
Yeah.
be very, very careful with that.
Yeah. Great story. So how can businesses ensure that their financial plan aligns with a customer-centric approach? So instead of being solely driven by the budget, how do you shift to really that customer-centric, client-centric approach so that as the customer tells you things like you're talking about, and it's not about price, maybe it's about features, maybe it's about delivery time, maybe it's about something else. How do you build that into your plan?
Well, it's yeah. I mean, those are difficult questions because but the more that you have the entire organization focus on a customer so that you get different inputs from different folks, the marketing folks, the financial folks, the operational folks. Uh, with major customers, all of those are in touch with them. So whether it's a technological innovation, well, the operations people might understand that better. Product development people might understand that. So I think it's kind of a holistic approach that you don't just think that the sales folks are the ones that are your conduit to your customer. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, it does. And one thing that I'll add to that, something that I advise clients on and business owners overall is it's great to have an annual plan, but the world doesn't operate annually. The world operates moment by moment, day by day. So I think it's really helpful to expect that you're going to refine each quarter. So you think about it, if you're doing your 2020 top 5 plan, by the time you get to the middle of February, you've got really good insights into what the remainder of the quarter is going to look like. And if you need to refine Q1, Q2, Q3, favorably, unfavorably, you do so. So I think just taking that sort of here's the annual plan approach, and then we know we're going to keep adjusting it because we know the world is spinning.
Yeah, one of the strengths of a staff meeting is you're bringing all the constituencies together, right? So the head of R&D, and so if you really are honestly looking at your results and you have all those different perspectives in a room, you can make corrective actions more quickly. Um, because once a plan is has been set in stones, so to speak, well, that's just a gauge of how you're doing, but you've got to continue, like you said, be proactive and shift gears when necessary.
So that leads to this question, right? You've talked about gathering input, listening, the importance of those listening skills, asking your customers, asking your competitors, looking to your own team members. After you take all of that, the customers, competitors, the risks, the opportunities, all those things that we've been talking about up until now, how do you distill all that information down into something that's actionable? Because a bunch of information is just a bunch of information.
Yes, yeah, and that's where analysis comes in. Something that I'm very well equipped to do. But you've got to, yeah, you have to be able to. take all that input and turn it into actionable items. And so having some folks that can help distill that, then take it into a staff meeting, get some agreement, get some alignment, and then say, okay, we're going to go 15, the ship is going to go 15 degrees to the port or whatever it may be. Um, and so, yeah, I mean, and by the way, AI is another tool now that can help distill that information. They can take lots and lots of numbers and translate it into and give you some insights.
Now, I mean, you talked about taking the plan into a staff meeting. You also talked about working with your team to create the plan. What's the best way that the annual plan should be communicated, and how do you keep that communication alive so it's not a one and done?
Well, I've been in a couple of places where we once we've agreed on that annual plan, and all the constituencies in the room, all the different staffs should all be have some input to that. But at the end of that, we actually presented it to all the employees. We would have a large forum, and I had a company where we literally had about 1,000 employees that would sit and listen to us. Give them a distilled version of the plan. A 30-minute presentation. So try to get everybody in alignment, because if you can get everybody in alignment down to the folks on the floor, you can get sometimes some very valuable input from what you'd call a lower level employee. But still, for everybody to get some buy-in on the plan, yeah, I think is a very healthy thing, um, to know where you're headed.
And I'm assuming buy-in isn't just one and done. So how often should plans be reviewed with your team during the year?
Well, I'm assuming that at every staff meeting, so, every month, let's say, that you take a look at least at the key performance indicators, the KPIs, the critical factors in your plan, which is, again, more than sales. It probably, in many cases, has a quality indicator for how good your product is coming off the line, and and then you're looking deep down at sectors and what sectors are or what types of customers are buying and not buying and versus prior years, and trying to just understand all of that. But I think monthly is a uh, healthy time.
Makes sense. So we're coming down the home stretch here. So in closing, you talked about doing the analytical work, right? You get all this information, you distill it, and that's hard work to distill, to analyze, to interpret. What advice do you have for business owners that may be uncomfortable with or maybe unfamiliar with the business planning process to help them get through that?
Through the bill, well, a lot of what we're talking about is not numbers. A lot of it is taking a look at what are the key success factors for the business. It's not just the bottom line. It's the key other factors. Delivering, again, high quality product. I mean, that oftentimes having innovations that where your product is just better than somebody else's because it does more things. And so there's no well, I try to operationalize, a plan. So when a finance person stands up and says, "Well, profits are up because sales are up," and sits back down again, well, that's just not a good analysis. Why are sales up? You know,
Right.
What- what's happening here? That's the key is being able to look at a trend and be able to touch a part of the business and say, Here's our problem," or "Here's what's going well." And so, uh, translate. So someone who's not financially oriented with good analysis, you're actually talking in operational terms, not in financial terms.
And that's super helpful because that's where business takes place. It's in the operation of the business. It's with the customers, as you've stressed. And so I would add to this as the close. If you're uncomfortable with planning, Do what Nike says. Just do it. Find a way to work through it. Get somebody, a mentor from SCORE to help you with it. They're subject matter experts. They're fantastic at it. There are resources that we have available at the Chamber on our website, SCORE first, and then other experts that we have available, but just do it. So, Amin, thank you so much. You are the subject matter expert on business planning. Thank you for sharing your insights with it. Folks, thank you so much for being with us today. Have a great rest of your day.
Well, thank you, Dave.
Thank you for joining us for the Greater Irvine Chamber Business Insights podcast. To stay informed about upcoming podcasts and other important business news, please subscribe to our channel or check the Greater Irvine Chamber website.